Oh, I was late to that trend. For the first video on my channel, and no other first videos on my channel, I thought I should go with something very topical and safe, while still contributing to the topic. Well, okay. Mine will focus more on the writing, with writing as a conduit. Come on, guys. Am I really that late? Dang it, I think I am. Well, that's derivative. But I'm self-aware about it, so that makes it good, right?
I get this.
Like animation, sub to Alecations. Don't like animation. I guess HBO still has a show for you. Animation has been having a rough few years as well. Everything else probably more important than animation. But hey, animation's fun. Let's just focus on how that's depressing right now. Things were getting specifically bad for animation in 2022. The corporations were as inconsistent with canceling projects and firing millions all over the place. Basically every streaming service said animation is not profitable, canned their animation department, or at least said some bad things about it, and then lost $1 billion in stocks. This happened like 3 times last year. HBO, Netflix, and Disney. From what I can tell in the West, it seems like people who care about animation and art getting better, but the corporations who hate it and their audiences are making things harder. This perfectly culminated at the end of the year with the release of a spin-off to a long-running franchise that defined a generation, inspired by the Spiderverse, with middling expectations and somehow exceeding them, is Velma and Puss and Boots: The Last Wish. Yeah, somehow they both fit the description. How? But seriously, it's weird how these two are pretty similar in a lot of ways, yet so different. The biggest and most obvious difference is one is considered one of the worst shows of all time. The other is considered one of the best movies of all time. They represent opposite ends of the spectrum as well as uniting the internet in ways rarely seen. And they did it back to back. The only thing controversial about The Last Wish was which of their fantastic villains were the best, and whether or not it's better than the Spiderverse. Meanwhile, the biggest controversy about Velma is not the rage bait, but which political party should be blamed for this. You know what? Political parties, whenever something horrible happens to the planet at large, they try blaming each other. Apparently, Velma was bad enough to join in on the tennis racket. So today, I am not going to compare which spin-off was better. That would be the biggest curb stomp of the century. For the versus part of the video, Puss in Boots wins like it isn't even close. So, we'll analyze how and why they're similar, yet the outcomes are worst animation versus best animation. Round 1. The source material. Shrek is known as being a movie series that is very cynical for kids' movies, yet still has a shocking amount of heart that is usually forgotten thanks to the memes. But it is very much defined by its characters and has not had a lot of variation from the original Shrek movie in terms of direction. On the flip side, Scooby-Doo is a property that was initially made as a very formulaic and malleable show. It was one of the best animated shows in the 70s, which doesn't say a lot because things were going badly at the time, but hey, fool's gold is still gold if there's nothing but dirt. But it is already one of the most corporate franchises out there, and one that doesn't just slightly change characters but flips them on their head. They'll cross over with any celebrity for whatever reason. They've been doing it since their inception. So the integrity of the franchise was never a top priority. In fact, the creators of almost all of these shows never know what to do with Daphne. Sometimes she's into karate. Sometimes she's a newscaster. Sometimes she's a damsel in distress who hates it. Even though Scooby-Doo was the one who was getting captured all the time, I guess. I don't know. Sometimes she's a psycho who talks to her hand puppets. The most praised iteration of the show on the internet depicts Fred as a trap fetishist. He wasn't even that into traps in earlier iterations, just there wasn't as much to work with. So with all of that being said, why does the spin-off with lots of continuity issues, the first new art style in the franchise, and an overhaul of the main character, with even less references to the original, get praised, while Velma, a reboot in a franchise that has more reboots than fans of Velma, with more original character, said franchises movies dedicated to wrestlers being gods, that the main cast take a back seat to say that Scooby-Doo has jumped the shark would be an insult to sharks. We are on a new fucking planet. We have reached Subnautica. We're on Subnautica just to be jumping new species. That is how insane Scooby-Doo has gotten. And somehow, Velma managed to take it too far. How do you even take a franchise too far when it's already this stupid? Let's get the most obvious one out of the way. It's just as media on its own. Puss and Boots is a masterpiece. Velma is just bad. Neither of them need references to the source material to hate or to love. You will not be confused by either of them, which, give Velma credit. It stands on its own. But it's terrible on its own. Puss and Boots is a direct sequel, stands on its own, and is great on its own. So, removing any current cultural zeitgeist continuity and honoring of the source material out of the way, that's going to be the underlying factor in every reason why. Simply put, accuracy is not always the most important factor. But that's a bit more of an obvious reason and a pretty bland one, Oh, the good movie is good because it's good. Wow, dumb allocations. More like... Wait, I gotta get into new habits. But specifically, people feel contempt from Velma. Now, in the following video essay, I will go into great detail why.
You know what 420 is, right?
Yeah. It's code for adults who still watch cartoons.
Or the show could just say it hates its audience. Okay. I don't think I need to psychoanalyze this stuff too much. Honestly, I'm not even offended by that. I don't even know what 420 has to do with that reference. What? That's just random. Meanwhile, Puss in Boots seldomly references Shrek, but when it's making fun of the original Shrek characters, it's pretty in character and natural. You also don't need to see the other movies to get Jack Horner's petty backstory, but it makes an already hilarious joke that much funnier. And also the moments like Puss and Shrek walking together, the far, far away denouement at the end is acknowledging Shrek, but in a way that builds up hype for a return to form. Meanwhile, the references of turning Mystery Machine into a drug, they just are kind of there. They're like, hey, reference. That existed. It's substanceless. It's trash. It's not even like substantive as a joke. Because there's a setup but no punchline. Or other times there's a punchline but no setup. That describes a lot of Velma jokes, as they feel like they're a punchline to a setup that never came. And it's really awkward. As for Puss in Boots, that movie is barely a kid's movie. And it really does just make sacrifices of wider audiences for the purposes of the story. We'll get into this later, but Puss in Boots forgoes a lot of the corporate mandated tropes. There's never a single joke undercutting a serious moment in the movie. All the jokes are done well. Whenever there's drama, they just let there be drama. They have entire characters who are basically serious the entire time. They don't sacrifice anything. There was a comment copy-pasted on Twitter about a dozen times for some reason, which was comparing the panic attacks in both animations. Velma gets over her panic attack via demeaning someone with comedy, and her panic attack is specifically supposed to be one of the few dramatic and compelling things in the show, and then it's turned into a joke, and then she weaponizes it to further how unlikable she is. Sometimes it isn't supposed to be funny, it's supposed to be her dramatic backstory, motivation, trauma, something she tries overcoming and is short-circuited with gags because we can't let the kiddies get too sad or bored. Wait, this is the adult show? What? Meanwhile, Puss in Boots' panic attack has zero dialogue, and what everyone expected to be the comic relief sidekick was progressing both of their characters and reassuring Puss in Boots! The body language is accurate to animals we care about, and we don't need to exposite a single word. As decent as the animation in Velma is, it is paced with a dialogue that the scary and haunting imagery never makes me feel anything.